Good evening, live from the venue in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to The Chase. Our discussion tonight, Zimbabwe's political dialogue, the final solution. This broadcast is brought to you by ZIM-Paper's TV network, ZTN, and our broadcast partners, Capitalk, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, and The Voice of America, going out to over 80 channels across the world. We also like to thank our partners for tonight's show, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches. Good evening, I'm Andy Hodges.
Good evening, and I'm blessing Munatsi to our audiences throughout Africa, Europe, America, and the Middle East and Asia. We say welcome to The Chase. To our millions of viewers joining us online, would love to hear from you. Join this discussion on Twitter. Our handle is at ZTN News. Our Facebook page is also ZIM-Paper's TV network, and of course our website ztn.co.zw. Do make sure to make your voice be heard. We would like to acknowledge our studio audience as well. Thank you for your patience, and we do apologize for starting a bit late. Also like to acknowledge esteemed diplomats who are part of the live audience. We say bonjour, molweni, muribwanji, salibonani.
And what do we say in Zimbabwe, Blessing?
Magadi.
Makadi. Now, this is our final episode of our special series on Zimbabwe's political dialogue. In our previous shows, we spoke to civil society, the media, political parties, youth, and women to get their views. Tonight, we attempt to wrap it all up by asking the hard questions. What happens next? What is the way forward? And what do we expect to come out of the dialogue in Zimbabwe? Can the MDC and the ruling ZANU-PF party ever sit around a table and reach a common understanding? This is The Chase, Zimbabwe's political dialogue, the final solution.
Now, Andy, before we leap into our vibrant discussion tonight, we would like to invite Bishop Ephraim Ngadziore, a member of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, ZCC Supervisory Council, to make a few remarks. Now, you are aware the Zimbabwe Council of Churches are also our partners for this episode and the whole series of the Zimbabwe political dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Bishop Ephraim Ngadziore.
Good evening, everybody. All protocols observed. Allow me, brothers and sisters, to say this short speech as I do welcome you all to this important gathering. It is good to see all the sectors of our society represented, just as the scripture says in Psalms, how good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters live together in unity. Psalms 133 verses 1 to 3. As church leaders, we have committed ourselves to support inclusive and comprehensive national dialogue process to help the nation address past hurts, resolve current pressing issues, and together envision a united, peaceful, just, and prosperous Zimbabwe. Today we are gathered here for yet another session where, as Zimbabweans, we are going to talk to each other, suggest solutions for our dear country, and most importantly, build a strong foundation of our national dialogue. As the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, we are also engaging various other stakeholders outside this platform: the civic society, the youths, women, business, diplomatic community, security sector, traditional leaders, and all other ecumenical partners. Through this broad-based process, our citizens will continue to reimagine the Zimbabwe that we want, that we all want, the Zimbabwe which will just be peaceful, united, and prosperous, tolerant, and guided our discussion, knowing that we cannot all think, see in the same way, yet we remain Zimbabweans in diversity. I have followed the 6 previous installments of this important dialogue process, where I learned that even though we may differ in our approaches, almost all of us want the same thing. That is for the things to improve in Zimbabwe. In honor of that, the church has made this effort to regroup all the different views and persuasions in order to find a lasting way forward. We are here for Zimbabwe. The people of Zimbabwe are looking to all the leaders and all the institutions represented here for the lasting solutions. May we set aside all our differences and have a genuine, constructive dialogue for the sake of our beautiful nation, Zimbabwe. Lastly, please allow me to appreciate the good work, the good working relationship that we have enjoyed with all our partners since we have started this process. The Zimbabwe Television Network, ZTN, we really value this collaboration. Together, we managed to facilitate engagement of various stakeholders who include political parties, our youth, women, civil society, and the media through the CHESS program. Along the way, we have managed to find a new friend, the Voice of America, VOA, whose work has been critical in our society. Thank you, VOA, for joining us in this journey. As the Zimbabwean Council of Churches, we continue to work and pray for our nation, for our country, which is currently facing a diversity of challenges. In our work, we create platforms where citizens meet and reflect on the social, economic, and political challenges facing our nation. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of our God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit lead you all in this vital work of national dialogue. I thank you.
Let's give him a hand. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as he makes his way. Critical words are coming there from Bishop Ephraim Ngadziore, a member of the Supervisory Council of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, our partners tonight. Andy, the common denominator, we are Zimbabweans first.
We are the Zimbabweans, and we all have to speak because we want our country to get better. This broadcast, of course, is live from ZimPaper's TV network here at the venue in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, to our esteemed panelists, you'll be asked to respond to a question and given 1 minute to make your submissions. Although interjections may be inevitable from time to time, we ask that you be civil yet vibrant and make your contributions through Blessing and myself. Our values at ZTN are dignity, dialogue, and debate.
Dignity, dialogue, and debate indeed. And now we kindly ask that each of our panelists briefly introduce themselves to our audience. I'll start with the lady to my immediate left.
My name is Mrs. Sekai Holland. I'm from the National Peace Trust, which I chair, and the Zimbabwe Women in Politics and Peace Building, 2 civil society organizations.
Thank you.
I'm Jacob Mafume from the MDC, led by President Nelson Chamisa. I am the Secretary for Elections. The stealing of elections ends here and now.
Thank you.
I'm Nyaz Paul Mangwana, Secretary for Legal Affairs in ZANU-PF.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm Sakile Sfela Ngoma. I'm with Women in Politics Support Unit, a civil society organization.
I'm Jealous Mawarire. I'm the spokesperson for the National Patriotic Front.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Terra Obeistole. I'm the youth commander of all Zimbabwean youths. Thank you.
Well, thank you and welcome to the chase. Let's hope we have a vibrant discussion full of the conversations that will take us forward.
As vibrant as the introductions.
As vibrant as introductions, yes. Now then, the Political Actors Dialogue POLAD was launched in May this year and was attended by leaders of political parties that participated in the presidential election last year. Missing from the table, of course, was Zimbabwe's main opposition party, the MDC.
Now, at that event, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa said, and I quote, "The culture of dialogue we begin today must indeed be synonymous with us as a nation and as a people. This journey we are embarking on must ultimately lead us towards improving our democratic practices as well as our culture. It must also lead us to a stage where we can compete, cooperate, always informed and guided by national interest."
Now then, throughout this series, the MDC has been adamant that they will not talk to ZANU-PF unless the issue of legitimacy is dealt with. ZANU-PF, on the other hand, says this is a non-issue and is not up for discussion and that they are backed by a constitutional court ruling. With such contrasting positions, how then will it be possible for the MDC and ZANU-PF to sit and talk for the good of the nation? Jacob.
Contrary to what you say, we have not been adamant that we will not talk to ZANU-PF. We, at the outset, started saying that we will talk to ZANU-PF. Our president wrote to Mr. Mnangagwa before the elections. We wrote to him after the elections, and we indicated that we were willing to dialogue. And one of the issues that we put forward was the 5-point plan, that one of the issues we had to discuss was the issue of legitimacy. At that time, we had only one legitimacy aspect, which was political legitimacy. But now, the legitimacy has gone on to performance legitimacy. The economy has completely collapsed, society has collapsed. And what we said is that we want an unconditional table where we sit and we open up and deal with the past. Remember, we had a military transition, otherwise known as a coup. We had to cleanse that process. The elections were hurriedly done, were condemned by all observer missions, the Commonwealth observer missions, the NDI, IRI observer missions. They had issues with that election. We had issues with that election. And we have maintained that we are willing to sit down with ZANU-PF any day, any time, but discussing a framework with no conditions. And we have always maintained, and we have written letters to that effect, but we have been ignored. And up to now, our invitation to treat has not been accepted. So they don't want to talk to us, but we want to talk to them.
Paul, I think some response to that, what Jacob has said?
Certainly, Jacob is a lawyer, and one of the things he swore to is the truth. He certainly is not saying the truth. I'm just coming from a multi-party dialogue process right now. President Mnangagwa has invited all political leaders who contested the last election to come to the table to discuss the challenges facing Zimbabwe and offer solutions. President Mnangagwa started the multi-party dialogue process, which is unconditional. There was no agenda on the table. Everybody who came to that meeting had an opportunity of setting out what they wanted debated, discussed by political players in Zimbabwe. And that process is going on. The invitation is still open for the MDC Alliance to come to the table and talk with other political parties. But they want a special treatment, a special position. And that's what ZANU-PF is saying, no, you participated in the election like any other political player, come to the table. You do not have a special place in Zimbabwe. You are a political player in Zimbabwe. Come to the table to discuss with everyone else. But they are asking for a special position as MDC Alliance. If that's not the case, then they should come to the table. The door is still open for them to come to discuss with other political players.
We have a conflict with ZANU-PF. They cannot mediate a conflict where they are the ones giving the punches. They beat us, they stole the vote, we have got grievances against them, they killed 7 people. In August, they killed 21 people. In January, they murdered in Claude Bad, people were raped. You cannot invite us to your house when you are treating our supporters as second-class citizens. We need a mediator, we need a decent table for discussion. We cannot be called to a slaughterhouse by a butcher.
Okay. Thank you for that. Obey and Lewis, I think representing the youth, of course, of your parties, you've heard what your other representatives have said, and it appears, of course, that the chasm between the two parties is even wider than ever. What will it take to get ZANU-PF and the MDC to actually sit down and at least talk for the good of the nation? Obey, can I start with you?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think it is a very key and specific question. What it takes is just one thing, which is honest. ZANU-PF must reach a point of acknowledging that they did not win any election. So like what Jacob has said, we cannot allow ourselves to be invited by one person who wants to be the player at the same time wanting to be the referee. We all know that Emerson Mnangagwa did not win an election. So as it stands, he does not have any local standard to be calling for a dialogue. What we have always said as a party, we have no problem to have a dialogue for the purposes of alleviating the suffering and the pains of the Zimbabweans, but on a certain condition, whereby we need someone who mediates that a particular process. But again, we don't want a dialogue which is invited for. We've maintained as a party that the highest court of this nation is not the Con Court, as men might want to believe. It is the people of Zimbabwe. So we're saying the people of Zimbabwe decided in 2018 that the president of Zimbabwe must be Nelson Chamisa. And that is an obligation that we are yet to deliver as a nation. So going forward, we need an admittance from ZANU-PF, especially Emerson Mnangagwa, that he must not lie to himself that is the president of Zimbabwe, therefore he has the right to be inviting people for a dialogue. No, that's not a position. So if he doesn't understand that, we'll make him understand through other mechanisms, which I might also share with the public if they have time to listen to.
We will get there. Thank you, Obey. Lewis, thank you. If you could maybe respond, and I'd like to take it back to Paul, because I think there were some issues there, Paul, you'd like to comment on. But Lewis, please.
Thank you so much. I'm getting it from Obey, that's good.
That's excellent.
You see, one thing that is very much interesting is that whenever you see people from MDC Alliance making contributions, it seems like they are reading a script, something that is very usual, something that is very normal, something that will always come from them. But the issue of dialogue has got nothing to do with personalities. The issue of dialogue doesn't require pride. The issue of dialogue requires commitment. And the issue of dialogue requires a genuine leadership, leadership which understand that they represent the people, if they claim that they represent the people. Now, if one would say that President Mnangagwa has no right to call for dialogue, then the question is, who has got that right when he is the president? When a political player or a political organization doesn't recognize a president of a country like ours as the real president, and that same political player would want then to seek someone else, I don't know from where, but the basis of dialogue starts from within. We can only solve our problems as Zimbabweans. But by the time we start reading other people's scripts, by the time we start boosting and expecting special treatment, then we lose it. It is about representing the people. And me and Obey, we are the young people here, we represent young people, we lead young people. We should not be able to, come to a point where we would say, is this good for people of our generation? Is it good for people of Zimbabwe? But by the time we read the same script and follow what the senior leadership expect, particularly what came from my brother, Amafue, then we lose it. I think the platform that is there is a basis to start proper dialogue, which is there anyway, and it can be improved from there, but we need genuine leadership. Elections, they came, they are gone, we are waiting for 2023 elections. And if anyone wants to be president, if anyone wants to be a leader in terms of our constitution, surely they must wait for 2023. Otherwise, today, we've got no legitimate issue, but we've got an issue where Zimbabweans must sit down and discuss pertinent issues. Our challenge is the country, from the economy, politics, and everything. as a nation, as a people of Zimbabwe.
Thank you. Paul, before you respond as well to some of the points raised, what appears to be very interesting is that ZANU-PF and the MDC have actually been sitting together and talking to each other throughout this whole series on political dialogue here on The Chase. So what stops you doing that at a national level?
The problem is that people are failing to distinguish dialogue with power-sharing negotiations. And unless we are able to draw the line, when we are in ZANU-PF, when we are talking of dialogue, we are saying to other political players, let's come sit and talk about issues affecting our country. We are not negotiating the outcome of the election. We are not negotiating power. We are discussing issues affecting us as Zimbabweans. The elections came, they are gone. The Constitutional Court made a determination that President Mnangagwa did win the election. ZANU-PF has a 2/3 majority in parliament. That's a given fact. The MDC alliance attempted to challenge only 11 seats through the electoral court. 11 out of 210. And they lost all of them again in court. That's a given fact. So the courts have actually made a determination that both in the parliamentary election, ZANU-PF did win. In the presidential election, ZANU-PF did win. So that issue is not for discussion. And Jacob is a lawyer. He knows what is called res judicata in law. Once a court has made a pronouncement, that's the end of story. So we are not discussing as to who won the election, who won how many seats. We are simply saying, as children of Zimbabwe, let's sit down and discuss the issues affecting our people, share ideas, and move on. The next election is coming in the next 4 years, and then we have another battle. But for now, this is not the time to fight. This is the time to talk and run our country properly, just like a family does.
It's certainly getting heated up in here, and the MDC and ZANU-PF are two of the big parties in Zimbabwe, but they're not the only political players at the dialogue table. What are your thoughts on this apparent deadlock? And I'm coming to you, Jealousy, between the MDC and ZANU-PF. Do you think without the MDC, dialogue is a waste of time, or in the MDC's own words, is not meaningful?
I think therein lies the problem that we have as Zimbabweans. We think that the crisis that we have emanates from the past election. We have a constitutional crisis that was created by the army. It's not the first time. They did that in 2008. And we made a mistake in 2008 that we allowed political parties to dialogue on their own. And they even left the army. I believe that what we need now is an inclusive dialogue process that includes the citizenry, that includes the civil society, and that includes the army, because the problem in this country is the army. The army is the one that moved in and took over ZANU-PF. Mangwana does not belong to ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF belongs to the army because the army moved in on the 15th of November, and we are favored by the reasons why they moved in. They wrote, the so-called command element of the army moved in, and they have signed the minutes. They said, we are moving in because we have realized that ZANU-PF is going to lose the election, so we are going to take over ZANU-PF from Mugabe and those that support him. So the army imposed someone who had been chased away from ZANU-PF, imposed him as the president, and that person then called an illegitimate election. So the problem that we have is a constitutional crisis that needs every one of us. I expect General Valerio Sivanda to be among us here. I expect General Chiwenga in his full military gear. Don't be fooled by hearing that he's the VP. No, he's a soldier. We expect Sibusiso Moyo to be here in his full military gear. And we begin actually to get to hear their concerns, why they moved in to take over ZANU-PF, why they moved in to take over the state, why they moved in to take over government. And until we do that, we are never going to have sustainable peace in this country. The hallmark of foolishness is doing one thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We did that in 2008, ignored the army and had political parties negotiate something that was not sustainable. 7 or less than 10 years down the line, the same army moved in and took over power. So we need the army, we need to dialogue with the army. Zimbabwe is actually another Sudan. The only difference is that in Sudan, citizens are on the streets. In Zimbabwe, citizens are incapacitated and they are at home.
Maybe Mrs. Holland, in light of what Jealousy has said, do you feel that the issues are not per se the deadlock between MDC and ZANU-PF?
Okay. I'd like to start by thanking ZCC for jumping into the pond to get Zimbabweans to have a forum like this one with a very exciting ZTN, which seems to be run by the young, and where we are all given an opportunity to get together and actually articulate what's on our mind. I'd like to say that. The second thing I'd like to say here is that in Africa, among the Bantu people, when a crisis reaches an apex, the women always stand up and talk among themselves about how we are going to move forward. And I think during the Liberation War, when things really got into a stalemate, the women's detachments were formed and the war took a much quicker time to finish. The third thing I'd like to say here is Zimbabwe is a very unique country. Cecil John Rhodes, his manner of occupying this country, gave us a culture which we seem to have failed to come out of. As far as I know, all the tools that Africans have used in crisis to move on are here. And what we need to do now is to, quite seriously, allow the men to go talking the way they are doing and really think through how we use the tools that are in front of us to move forward. What are the tools? The first one is that national dialogue is what we are talking about here now. We are still caught up in the track 1 of how dialogue takes place by talking with one group, the politicians, the women, the youth, and that. Mawarire is quite right, Jealousy, that it has to be inclusive. Our constitution, section 20, says that sovereignty in Zimbabwe belongs to the people. So track 2 is intermediate. We've got caught up in that as well, of national dialogue. Where we want to go is track 3. In track 3, I think civil society in Zimbabwe and the ZCC has demonstrated that with ZTN. Civil society needs to get out of its parochial hole where it has dug itself and taken sides with the politicians and just say to themselves, the role of civil society is to actually unite the people and work with the people and have outcomes that take the country forward. I believe that there are signs that this is happening. Last weekend, we were in Chipinge to celebrate the 99th birthday of Ndabaningi Stole. The children have decided they will form a foundation which takes Zimbabwe forward, where their father was not able to do. We were quite surprised when we got there to find that the children of Joshua Mqabuko Nyongolonkomo were there to support the children of Ndabaningi Stole to unite the people where their parents had not been able to go forward. So I'm saying to you, Africans never ever get caught up in a stalemate where they can't get out. There are lots and lots and lots of new growth where people are connected intergenerationally. And where Zimbabwe is, well, like ZCC, it's very well connected internationally to the World Council of Churches. And they are doing their best to allow the politicians, ukubhodla, I don't know what you call it when you've eaten a lot, and in Zimbabwe we've eaten a lot of really bad politics, and you belch. We'll allow the men to belch, but we have a duty to move forward.
Sakile, I'm going to come to you, and in light of the challenge that Sekai, Mrs. Holland has said in terms of the civil society, what will be your response, and also taking into consideration what Jealousy said, that there might be a misconception?
I completely agree with Jealous except for 1 or 2 points, but I think the issue is that why are we trapped between political parties? It's a rock and a hard place, and it's not useful for us. And at the end of the day, the dialogue that they're speaking about, whichever way they describe it, or whichever platforms, they invite each other, they don't invite each other, they have a mediator, they don't have a mediator, ultimately it's an elite dialogue. It's an elite dialogue that's going to have elite outcomes. So, you know, we come back to saying, why is it that the voice of the citizens is deprioritized? Why is it that public opinion in Zimbabwe doesn't matter? The opinion that matters only matters when you are wearing a particular political party hat. So, for example, we are having this whole process. Why didn't we have ordinary people coming in? Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm just trying to say that as Zimbabweans, we have drunk the alcohol of political parties and, you know, very senior people in our society. But these people have failed us, you know. And the reason we're all sitting in here, the 250 people in the audience, is that there is a problem in Zimbabwean society. And the political parties are not going to deliver the solutions. And whether the political parties determine whether it is legitimacy that they're after and we change presidency, or we find a good way of changing presidencies, or we come to dialogue on interests, which is what you know, Mr. Mangwana is talking about. Ultimately, the interest that will be there will be the elite interests. They will not be the interests of the ordinary citizens. So, you know, the conversation about dialogue matters in terms of not just the parties, but also about the processes. Why is it that we were discussing with ZCC, which is great, but why are we not seeing those who feel that they are in charge, or those who want to be in charge, speak about methodologies of putting the citizen on the table, rather than their issues on the table? Right now, if we discuss the different platforms of whether it's POLAD, whether it is whatever commissions are working on the dialogue, what are the issues? And what are the interests driving those issues? And at what point will that dialogue be in the public domain?
Right, thank you for that. Before we move on to our next question, I think that, Paul, you heard what Jealousy said about, in essence, you're not part of ZANU-PF, you're part of the army. Would you like to respond to some of the comments that he made?
And also, I think added to that, Andy, if he can also respond to what Sakile is saying, that could we be following an elitist approach?
Let me start with submission by Jealous. That there was a military intervention in the politics of Zimbabwe is a fact. But it happened, and we held an election. The party which was in charge, in fact, the party which was being led by the former president, took control of the process after the military intervention. There was a central committee meeting, there was a vote of no confidence, we went to parliament, which led to the resignation of the president. That was not a military situation. That was a constitutional civilian process. And we then went for elections, and all the political parties which wanted to contest that election, contested that election. That's a fact. And there was an outcome. So to say that everything which took place after the military intervention was a military process is not factually correct. There were civilian processes in terms of the constitution which was agreed to by everybody, that in the event of the president leaving office, the vacancy can only be filled in by someone nominated by that party to which that president belonged. And so that is what happened. In terms of the constitution, we agreed to, all of us as Zimbabweans, which received 94% approval from Zimbabwean population. So everything which happened, the initial intervention was not constitutional, but the processes which took place thereafter were purely constitutional.
Thank you. Jealousy?
I think Munyaradzi is the wrong person to answer that question. Because what happened, if we want to go by what happened during the military intervention, you and Monzora were then called into KG6 to look at ways of legitimizing the coup. So what you are doing and still doing is trying to legitimize the coup. The fact of the matter is that the military moved in, took over ZANU-PF, took over the state, and took over government. And they imposed someone who had been chased away from ZANU-PF. And the military provided you with the vice president. Chiwenga attended the so-called ZANU-PF extraordinary Congress in military gear. He wasn't the vice president of ZANU-PF, he wasn't the second secretary of ZANU-PF, but he attended your extraordinary...
that is not correct. That is not a correct fact.
We are not children, Comrade Mangwan.
Okay,
No. Excuse me.
Hold on, please, Ms. Holland, please go ahead.
I think that we need to actually move in an African spirit, that we've been given an opportunity to speak, and that, as we said before, we should actually all speak. I would like to say, what has happened, not just when the coup happened and up to now. What we need to talk about now is, how do we move forward? And I think that I said the tools are all here. We have got the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, which is to actually guide Zimbabweans in this kind of process. And it has got very clearly spelled out its values: inclusivity, which Mawarire has talked about, Ubuntu, victim-orientedness, transparency, and confidentiality. I think that if we are going to be invited, and there are only 2 women on this panel, and you want to overwhelm us so that we are just here as people, we are also here to say something. What we need to do in this discussion today, if it's the final one, is to come out with an understanding of that there is a way of moving forward, and it is there. And it is the track 3 of national dialogue. It's the comprehensive approach. That one is more time consuming. It brings people together, all members of the society. Consultations begin at the grassroots as conversations. They're all taking place all the time, because the people that are most affected are the grassroots people. So I'm saying that the discussions, as Sakile is saying, should not be starting from the top going down. They actually have to come from the people going up. And the people are talking all the time. That's the first thing. Process is about that. We need to actually have a legal framework in which we do this. Because the problem that we have right now is that we don't have a legal framework. And we have got a bunch of lawyers trying to take us everywhere. The legal framework that we need is, what is the structure of the national dialogue do we need to have? That being agreed, that has to actually be put down, and it has to actually move forward as something that is going to be legitimized in the long run. You need to have a board, a secretariat, you need to have your committees, you need to have a drafting committee, which takes the national dialogue to each logical conclusion. And I think as long as we don't have grassroots people at any point involved in this, we are really going to continue to talk about the past and not about how we move forward.
Great, thank you very much. Jacob, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, I just want to take exception to a victimless approach that Sakile has adopted. We've got, she is equalizing the political actors. She's saying that we are elite We are just political actors. We are not this thing is right at the top. We've got 13 parliamentarians right now facing treason charges. We have people, and if that is elitism, then there's a new definition of elitism. We've got people on stringent bail conditions under this political system. And if that is elitism, then I have the wrong dictionary. There is people who have died under this, and they all belong to the MDC. And if that is being elite to be killed, then I have a different definition. What we want is something that really looks at what is happening in this country. There was a stolen election. It was stolen from people. There is a conflict. We are not engaged in politics just for the sake of it. We need to have a situation whereby we look at the facts, what has happened, and we are able to put the actors in the political dialogue process. We're not here to say we just want to be part of a political dialogue simply to benefit a few bunch of politicians. We are here to be able to discuss something that really happened, people, things that are still happening in the media and everywhere. And then we are able to say who is talking to who, how do we talk to each other, and where do we go from here. And remember,
Grassroots.
we have done this before, and it has happened elsewhere.
Can I have the right to respond? Because that was a point that was responsive to me. I think there's the
Very
issue.
quickly, then we'll have to move to Lewis and Obey. Please, Sekile, go ahead very quickly. Yeah? Just to respond quickly, please.
Yeah, I think the issue here that we're saying is that the citizens don't have someone who can do the roll call that Mr. Mafume has just done, speaking about what the context of the people in the MDC. And I am not trying to seek to equalize the political parties, but I am simply saying that there is an essentialization of political parties and a prioritization of the political voice. And if I had the statistics for maternal mortality, I would tell you that we are currently at 600 deaths for every 100,000 live births. That would be the roll call that I would give. I would talk about the 72% of Zimbabweans who are living in poverty. I would talk about the hyperinflation that we're going through. I don't even have the statistics for the people who are dying because of high blood pressure, a collapsed health sector, etc. But the point is the roll call for citizens is there, and it is as equitable as that is in the political space. But you don't have someone who is standing up for that on a day-to-day basis. And that will continue to be an elite perspective.
All right, thank you. Lewis and then Obey after that, please. Lewis?
Okay, thank you so much. Was this deliberate or what? May I please have another mic if it's available, please? I think there are certain things that require honesty, especially when people are leaders. The only reason why people like my brother, Jealous, has got issues with what happened in that particular November, which is to me was special and necessary, is because there were expectations. There were expectations that after the military intervention, people were going to be accommodated and given positions, which is something which did not happen. There were expectations that after that event, perhaps some kind of negotiation was going to take place so that people can accommodate each other in government, which is something that did not happen. Why is it that it did not happen? Because it was not constitutional. So the constitution was followed in terms of replacing the former president with the new president. That's something else for another day. But the real issue is, I see Mai Holland, she has got something that is written. Probably it has been written somewhere to try and come up with a certain direction to the dialogue and a certain suggestion from other people whom we don't know where it was written, I suppose. But thank you for keeping quiet. And if you look at political positions for getting pertinent issues, that's where we lose it. Let's differentiate political positions and national issues. Yes, it is correct, that there are people who have been arrested, there are people who are yet to appear in court, and etc., etc. But the other question is also, are they not guilty? Again, it's something that needs the court to decide. But when we are looking at the issues of dialogue,
let's set aside things that we view in our political organizations as our positions, as things that we complain about, and focus on national issues. National issues go beyond a political party. National issues goes beyond political expectations. National issues goes beyond an organization with a few individuals. It is a national because it is about national issues.
The issue that you raise, Lewis, I notice Paul also alluded to the same issue, and we did see that throughout our political dialogue series. There appeared to be some confusion in the distinction between political and national dialogue. Do you think that a national dialogue process would have been better, Obey? Would it have been a better route and maybe more representative of all stakeholders than one that only has political parties, as you respond to Lewis?
Okay, thank you so much for that question, but I'll come to that later. There are some two areas that I want to correct before we proceed. I would like to respectfully deal with what the sentiments from Madame Sekai Holland. She mentioned something to do with what has happened, let's work out the way forward. It's actually unfortunate to think in that manner, because what has happened is actually painful, and therefore the way forward can only be worked by addressing the foundation of what we are facing today. People have been raped, people have been killed. So for us then to only come here and say what has happened before addressing that cancer, it means they are setting a very dangerous and wrong precedents, which this nation does not deserve to have. And secondly, Ramangwana said something that was equally misinforming and misguided at the same time. He said the dialogue that we are having is not there to address anything to do with governance, but rather the challenges that are being faced by Zimbabweans. But look, all the challenges that we are facing today are emanating from the governance crisis. We are simply saying, when we went to an election, we all aspired that we are going for an election that will elect a leadership that will lead Zimbabwe, but that did not happen. The public opinion did not make sense to ZANU-PF. What made sense was their continued clinging into power. So, I mean, all the challenges, no matter how much you want to address them, it's tantamount to addressing the symptom and ignoring the cause if you don't focus on what has led to where we are today. So the issues of legitimacy need to be addressed and need to be dealt with decisively. This is why we are saying as a party, we have to go for a dialogue, but based on the condition that political and legitimate, political and advocacy pressure must be put to the public, so that ZANU-PF also understand that the people are angry. What we did in the previous election was not respected. So if they could not respect us in 2018 through the voting process, they are going to respect us this time around through other means, which we are going to be.
Thank you for that. Please.
Excuse me.
There was a person that was given, which I made to respond. So allow me to deal with it.
Go ahead.
He said, was it going to make any difference if we had to have a national dialogue instead of a political dialogue? You know, every human being is a political animal. So whether you want, it's now an issue of semantics. Whether it's national dialogue or political dialogue, you still have political players there. The governance of a country actually have a political process that emanates from political parties. When you go to an election, what represents are the political parties. And these political parties are made of people. So it doesn't make any difference to say you don't want political parties to be present on a negotiating table. It's the same as you don't want to see people voting. A national process is a product of the people coming together under a political banner. So whether you call it national dialogue, whether you call it political dialogue, it doesn't matter. What matters is the process. And in this case, you're saying the process that is being championed by one Emmerson Mnangagwa is not the proper process. We need a mediator who is independent, who does not take sides when you have to talk of national dialogue. As a party, we actually concerned and disturbed by the current status quo. We are in a deep crisis, and going forward, you need to address that crisis. And this does not need people to politic and to spin some words. We need proper solutions.
Great, thank you very much. This live broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network. We'd like to thank our broadcast partners, Capi Talk, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, and of course, Voice of America, going out to 80 channels around the world. Now, Obey, you mentioned something, and I think Jacob alluded to it, but the MDC has been quoted in the press saying that the party will remove President Mnangagwa before his term expires. Can you clearly state what that actually means and how you intend, or how your party intends to do that?
Okay, that's not a secret. Every political exists to remove another political party in power. The question is how. Maybe that is where we should be discussing not to be panicking when we say we want to remove Emerson Mnangagwa from power. It is a correct position that the suffering that we are facing today is a production, or rather a product of ZANU-PF's failures. So going forward, how do you address the challenges to remove that or those people who have caused the problems that we have? We have so many processes that we are going to pursue. And to start with, as a political party, we are not going to be ashamed of ourselves, but we are going to occupy the streets to ensure that we put pressure to the people who cannot reform. I mean, before the 2018 election, we're telling them to put a reformation agenda. So they failed to reform. But this time around, we are going to reform them, including the people in uniform, the military that has been referred to. So the people in uniform, if they can't reform, we'll reform them.
Okay, Paul, do you have a comment to that, please?
We have a constitutional government which has got the power to deal with any people who want to cause trouble for the constitutional democracy in Zimbabwe. So that issue is not on the negotiation table and will not be on the negotiation table. We can talk about many other issues, but not who has the right to run this country until the next election. That right was given to ZANU-PF through the ballot box, and let no one kid themselves.
Okay.
That ZANU-PF is prepared to negotiate its right to rule. It will not.
Thank you. Paul, thank you. Let's just get Mrs. Holland, and then we'll come to you, Jacob. Mrs. Holland?
I'd like to say to the two youths that we, the elders, have really not done our job of passing down how things should be done. So it's really tragic that you actually both misconstrue what I have done. In my age group, when you're invited to come and talk, you really prepare. Unodoma. And you really get your facts right, and you get everything right to respect the audience. Yes, I did a lot of work. I called some colleagues. We sat down from civil society, from peace building. Yes, we have written down how we see how things should move forward as patriots of this country. One, that's what I'm addressing to you. And yourself, when the temperatures are high, the role of women is to ensure that everybody's temperatures come down so that everybody is given an opportunity to say what is in their heart. Because what everybody puts on the table is what brings an answer. Therefore, when I say to you, we need to find a way to move forward, I mean exactly that. To contextualize how we are going to talk about such painful experiences that Zimbabweans have undergone. The third point I want to make to you is an appeal. The experiences that people my age have had in politics is one which makes us say, let us stand aside and think through what to do. We are doing exactly that. The issue of violence in Zimbabwe, yes, started in the political arena with ruling classes using violence to oppress the people. The tragedy that has made some women like myself move out is that this violence is now a tool that is used by most political parties, not just ZANU-PF. We have to deal with that. My experience of August 1, my experience of January 19, I have really been troubled because it is not what we are being told in public. So I would really like here for everybody to listen carefully to what each person is saying without fungira. Let's respect one another here.
Thank you very much. Jacob, before you respond, I just want to also add this to your question as well. Indications are, of course, that the MDC may want to go down the route of protest. So when you respond now, do you think that the route of protest is the right solution?
We have a constitutional right to protest, Section 59. Every protest is constitutional. It will be a mad person who will not protest when you are living in the conditions we are living in. We are living subhuman conditions. We now have cow dung bakeries. where people are supposed to get bread from those cow dung bakeries. So when we have reduced ourselves to that level, it will be foolhardy to believe that we cannot protest. He talks about having power. They have no power. There is no electricity. There is no fuel. There is nothing. They can't feed the people. They cannot put medicines in hospitals. They have no power over anything except probably killing people. We, as the MDC, name one person we have killed. They were clapping hands. We are not equal to ZANU-PF. Name one person. They kill people in dozens. They murder people in dozens. They rape people, they torture. We have not done that. You cannot say all political parties are killing people. We have not killed anyone. We have no blood on our hands. These hands are clean. And that is what we are protesting. So we cannot be equalized and be dismissed as if we are part of the perpetrators. We are the victims here, and the victimhood arises from us saying we are MDC. And if people don't recognize that, then we have a problem. All our leaders are being threatened to become. Matema Danda, 3 days ago, said we'll kill people. He said it, all of you heard it. He has not been reprimanded. There has not been. An MDC person simply says, I want to demonstrate. Says the word, he's in handcuffs. Matema Danda is walking freely right now, and somebody says we are equal to ZANU-PF. That's not true.
No, he did not understand Matema.
Just to intervene.
Okay, thank you. Jealousy, we will come to Paul, I think, to respond.
I actually want to have audience with this law lecturer as to how they made him pass law
but
without understanding
you have given him a lot of time.
Okay, Jealousy, please go ahead.
I think we are agreeing as a panel here that the general citizen should be accorded a chance to map the way forward, isn't it? And the avenue that should ideally be available for the general citizenry is the constitutional right to demonstrate, the constitutional right to question decisions that are being imposed upon them, the constitutional right to question their lived circumstances, and the constitutional right to hold those that purport to be in power, to hold them to account. But we don't have that right. And I'm glad that Jacob has actually indicated who has taken away that right. It's the army, because the Deputy Minister of Defense said that if you want to exercise that right, if you want to go into the streets and demonstrate that we are suffering, we are going to kill you. So what are we saying? Are we saying we have to create a platform like this where all of us, 18 million Zimbabweans, can come here in front of television cameras, then we can be accorded a chance to air our views? I believe in a constitutional democracy. We go by what the Constitution provides. The Constitution provides for the people to demonstrate. And let no political party, let no politician, let no government official use the army to kill people that are exercising their democratic right. That's what we want.
Thank you very much indeed. Unfortunately, we're going to have to take a break, but when we do come back, I will think that Paul and Lewis should respond to that and those issues. This live broadcast is brought to you by ZTN, Zimbabwe's TV network, and of course, I'd like to thank our broadcast partners, Capitalk, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, and of course Voice of America, going out to over 80 channels around the world. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors and our partners, Zimbabwe Council of Churches.
Now do remember, you can be a part of this discussion if you're joining us through our social media platforms, on Twitter at ZTN News, also on Facebook at Zimbabwe's TV network. Do keep your questions coming through. Our producers will be taking them and forwarding them to the panelists. The Chase takes a short break. Don't go away. ZTN, and of course we'd like to thank our broadcast partners, Capitalk and Nyami Nyami FM,
Diamond FM, and of course Voice of America, going out to over 80 channels across the world. And of course, we'd like to thank our partners, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, where this would not be possible.
We'd also like to thank our viewers who are joining us online on our social media platforms. That's on Facebook at Zim Papers TV Network, also on Twitter at ZTN News. Do keep your comments coming through and your questions. We will forward them to the panelists.
Now, of course, the views expressed in the chase are those of the panelists and nowhere reflect the views of ZTN or Zim Papers Group. Now then, before we move on to our next question, I think that both Paul and Sekile need to respond. Paul, you heard what was said before we took a breather. If there's anything you have to say to what Jacob and to what Jealousy had to say.
What I'll say is I hear this repetitive statement to say that the army did this, the army did that. President Mnangagwa set up a commission to look into whatever happened on that fateful day. And the results are for everyone to read. It was public. The report was made public. I think we need to distinguish ZANU-PF and government and other departments in government. As a political party, we believe in democracy. We brought democracy as a party. We fought for democracy, multi-party democracy. And if we allowed other political players to exist in the political terrain. So we believe in the existence of political parties. This is why we are inviting the MDC Alliance to join other well-meaning political parties who believe that together, as a people, we can discuss the challenges we have and proffer solutions. And President Emerson Mnangagwa said the door is open even now for the MDC Alliance to come to the table, but they want special treatment. This is where we have a difference. We are simply saying, you are a political player like all other political players. Come to the big table, let's discuss in peace all areas you want improvement on, all areas you want, and add value to the politics of Zimbabwe. So the door is open, but they are refusing. They are simply saying they want their own negotiations, as if they want a power sharing deal. They can dream about that. We are going to have the next election when they are due. Here we are simply talking about the welfare of our people, how to sanitize the political environment. We can talk about that. How to ensure that we hold elections without much contestation. We can talk about that. And these are the issues we are saying, let them be discussed together with all the other political players. And the door is open for them to still join the dialogue.
Thank you, Paul. Sekile, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think this conversation that we're having is a classic example of the problems we are facing as a country, where we collapse into the conversation about political parties and we collapse into the conversation about who is ruling, because that's what we are talking about. Who is ruling, who is going to be given the opportunity to rule. And yet we talk about governing. Governing is not about ruling. It's about leadership. And clearly we have a crisis of leadership in the country. Because when we begin to talk about the issues we want to dialogue about, the things that we want, the platforms of the dialogue, the players to the dialogue, the processes to the dialogue, the people who are doing the dialoguing, we are clearly missing the boat completely. There are issues of stewardship that have completely gone out of the conversation. There are issues around leadership in itself, intrinsically, what does it mean? And we have, what is it? Kutunga mirira versus vatongwi kutonga. That's the crisis we're having right now. And when you as a citizen stand up and you say, this is how I see it, right? And when Jacob begins to say, no, I'm equalizing the political parties, I will insist that if that's how he wants to interpret it, fine. We are equalizing the political parties, because what we are saying is that we're not seeing citizens at the center of this process. When we talk about the elections and you talk about the person on the street, there are so many other people who didn't even register to vote. There are so many other people who didn't vote. Yes, we can talk about what it means when you don't register to vote, what it means when you don't go and vote, but what is the reasoning behind that? And that's what dialogue is supposed to do. It's supposed to ask us to do leadership, the big ticket conversations about what is Zimbabwe, what is going wrong, how are we supposed to fix it, what are the steps that we need to do.
And we've done this before, right? We did it before in 2008, and some people were happy with it, some people were not happy with it. But ultimately, what do we say the citizens got out of that dialogue process? So I think for me to begin to say it's about A and B, already we've missed the boat. The way we are framing this conversation, we have missed the boat.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you. I think we need to now move on to the POLAD process, because the agenda for POLAD and its key deliverables intend to help ordinary Zimbabweans. That's how the POLAD process is being pitched. However, it appears that ordinary Zimbabweans are in the dark about the details. Maybe you could explain, or try and explain, what is the agenda of POLAD, and what concrete measures will POLAD actually take to help our nation? Sakila, will you have any comments on that first, and before I move to the other panelists?
That's exactly what we're saying. So we have a presidential platform, which is for political parties. Some political parties opted out, some opted in. Right now, if I ask anybody else in the audience, what are they talking about? Do we know? We are talking here, they are talking there. What does that mean for us? And he said very nicely, I am coming from a multi-party platform.
Paul, maybe?
I'm coming from POLAD.
So Paul, what are you talking about?
POLAD is political parties dialogue. Simple. The political parties, there can be so many dialogues. Religious organizations can have their dialogue. Sporting organizations can have their dialogue. This dialogue we are having in POLAD is about politics. So the political players are talking about politics.
Yeah, but Paul, surely transparency also matters. If the political parties are talking about politics and the ordinary Zimbabweans are members of those parties, isn't it incumbent on the political parties to tell us what you're talking about at POLAD?
Yes, I do not have the mandate right now, but the point is, because I'm just coming from a workshop where we're actually clearing the way to say, how are we going to engage, what are the issues we are going to discuss? Because what I make clear for the public to know is that President Mnangagwa did not set the agenda for POLAD. He simply invited all the political players who participated in the last election to say, can we sit down as children of Zimbabwe and decide for ourselves as political players what we want to talk about? So it is the political parties who are participating in POLAD who are setting the agenda for discussion, who are setting out the issues they have to discuss. And this is why I've said that the door is still open for all the other political players who decided, because they did not even know what was going to be discussed, how the discussions were going to take place. So with that in mind, we are simply saying they can still join and participate, because no one came with a preconceived agenda to say you can only discuss this or that, except to say we want to talk about the politics of our country. This is why we are political players. At the same time, where the economy is affecting politics, we discuss it. Where social issues are affecting politics, let's discuss. So the agenda is open. Every political player who came to the table had an opportunity of putting across issues they want to discuss in POLAD.
Okay, so Paul, if I can, and I want to come to jealousy as well. Mrs. Holland, will come to you. The point here, of course, is that if POLAD is a political party dialogue, yet normal Zimbabweans, ordinary Zimbabweans, who that dialogue is supposed to assist, have no idea what is being discussed in that. Jealousy, is that a good way to start? Mrs. Holland, we will come to you after that. Jealousy.
I think as political parties, these political parties, I think it's ZANU-PF and a few individuals who are politically insignificant. If they are organizing an electoral pact for the 2023 elections, they can do that. But I think what we have is a serious problem. We have a serious crisis, a constitutional crisis, as I said, which is manifesting itself in the economics in the country. We don't have fuel, we don't have ZESA, we don't have virtually everything, we don't have even a president. So if you have such a crisis, do you sit as political parties and begin to talk about how you are going to approach the next election? No, you don't do that. What we need to do, that's why I said the dialogue that we need should be an inclusive dialogue. And that inclusive dialogue should be premised on the truth. We have to identify where our problem is coming from. Chinua Achebe said, if you are in a situation and the rain is starting to hit you, you have to look back at where the rain started hitting on you, and you begin then to map the way forward. We have to look at the genesis of the problem in this country. That's why I went back to 2008, because there is a common factor. And this brother of mine is saying, I hate the army. No, but I'm the only person who has said we need the army on the table, because we need to understand why they resort then to getting into politics to have their concerns heard. And they have created for us a very huge problem in this country. They have manipulated elections. 2008, they manipulated this election because they imposed the president who then called an illegitimate election. And that's why we are in the crisis that we are in. So these political parties can talk about what they want to do for 2023. But the issue that we are seized with as Zimbabweans is the constitutional crisis that is manifesting in the stagnation of the economy, in the kind of problems that we are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, where we don't have power, we don't have water, we don't have everything. If you are confronted with those problems, you don't say as political parties, let's talk about the next election. Let's talk about how we are going to work together in order to win the next election. You don't do that. We are faced with very serious problems. She was talking about the mortality rate among women giving birth, among preterm children, because there is no constant supply of electricity. There are quite a lot of things that are happening in this country. And that crisis, we have to identify where it is coming from. And we have seen through experience that whenever the army gets in and meddles in our elections, we get into a serious problem like we did in 2008, like we are experiencing now. Then how do you deal with that? You don't ignore the army. No. Let's talk, let's address that. Let's have a professional army. Let's have a situation where if we call for elections, those elections are going to be participated for in a very free and fair environment, and we get a legitimate government out of it. But if we are going to bury our heads in the sand and say, no, we don't have a problem with the army, everything is okay. When Matema Danda is saying, if you demonstrate, I will send the army. We have to be very truthful. The operation, the military-assisted transition that Mangwana is referring to, the presidential spokesperson was very clear on the 16th of February this year. He said the careers, and I quote, the careers of Operation Restore Lagos, which are the soldiers, are ZANU-PF cadres to the bone. And this is the army. The army is ZANU-PF to the bone. How do we make our army professional? That's the question that we are seized with.
I think we will need to give others a chance. Mrs. Holland, I'll come to you, and then after that to Lewis and Obey. Mrs. Holland, you already highlighted the importance of including grassroots in this process, but what is your assessment of the current rollout by the POLAD?
I just want to say again, we are wasting an opportunity that ZCC and ZTN have given us by really going around the same points. What I wanted to say to Mr. Mangwana is, ZANU-PF did not singularly deliver democracy in Zimbabwe. Civil society has worked so hard to ensure that under the most difficult circumstances, democracy would come to this country. The faith-based organizations right now, when there is no light, are making sure that they are pushing so that democracy is advanced. So, the point I want to make to Mr. Mangwana is, as somebody who has been in both political processes, ZANU-PF needs to learn to listen and to accept that mistakes have been made. And secondly, ZANU-PF needs to understand that, yes, there are some things that they do right, there are some things they do wrong. I want to say that to Jealous Mawarire. People like myself look for the light in darkness everywhere. And I marched on November 17. I don't regret I did that. because Mugabe was removed. And for me, he was a stumbling block to us moving forward.
The army provided a platform for
Excuse me.
for
Just give her a chance,
Excuse me. I marched on November 17, 2017. I have no regrets. What I expected after the march was that the organizational prowess we showed, Mr. Mangwana, for 3 days before the march, civil society did not sleep. We were organizing to ensure that the march was going to be inclusive and that it was going to be broad-based, and it was. What I expected was that civil society would continue to organize along the different mandates they have as civil society and keep the pressure as civil society on demands of what would make the process move forward positively. Unfortunately, that has not happened. But I want to say also, the point I really want to say about this is that POLAD to me is not a bad thing. The president, where he is, needs to actually keep his head also above water to see how things can be done. For example, the reason I went to the march was the way in which, when he came back, he talked about the country has to unite, has to be peaceful, and has to develop. And we had peaceful elections. Now, I'm saying to you, that theme of peace, unity, and development is what the ZCC in the faith-based organizations, which are actually quite massive in Zimbabwe, is following through. So POLAD for me are people who are coming together to try and define what is going on. There are a couple of people who are in POLAD that some of us in the peace movement are asking for information on what they are doing. And it seems to me that what ZCC is doing, what POLAD is doing, what lots of different organizations are doing, the Children of Ndabaningi Stole and their new foundation, the Friends of Ndabaningi Stole, the Children of Nkomo, these are the new growths that are working towards coming together for people to truly sit down and understand what the past has deposited as to where we are and how we move forward. And I really want to end by saying I appreciate very much this forum. If we could please listen to one another and keep moving forward. So for me, POLAD is a very positive thing, and I think instead of us trashing it, we should see how we can have also processes which bring us together. So there is going to be an inclusive process.
Right. Mrs. Holland, if we can listen to each other and keep moving forward, blessing.
Very important highlights there. Lewis and Obey, I'll give you a chance to respond, starting with Lewis.
Thank you so much. I almost say that we're not here as spectators. And where we get it wrong is where we think that the older generation has got solutions for everyone. We also want space as young people to make sure that you hear us, what we'll be saying. It's more or less like the discussion was ending here and getting back there. But anyway, there are two things that are critical for dialogue: maturity and compromise. These are the two things that form the basis for a dialogue, amongst many other things. Something that is lacking in our political organizations. You need to do away with certain things that you love most for the good of the people that you lead. We are young people, and people talk of a constitutional right to demonstrate when they are airing their grievances. But those that are organizing, those that come up with the idea of demonstrations, do not actually go into the street. They will be in the comfort of their homes and watch young people, you know, in the streets, destroying people's property, getting arrested, getting killed, and you name it. So it is critical that when you come up with an idea, you also follow the idea in terms of implementation. And the last thing that I would want to say, we have got a challenge as a country, and we are our own enemies as Zimbabwean people. If you look at our audience right now, there is some lack of tolerance amongst ourselves. We have very few people in here, and already we've got challenges even with the audience itself. So what is going to happen with people who are outside this building? What are we going to say to those people who are saying they must be part of the dialogue? We have got a crisis, not necessarily a constitutional one, as Brother Mauro would say, but we have got a crisis of identification. Let's identify ourselves as Zimbabwean people. Let's identify ourselves with our problems, and let's identify ourselves with the people that we represent. If you do that, then we don't have any challenge negotiating. But it is also important when others are doing something. If you feel like you don't want to participate, come up with a better idea. Don't criticize something that has been started by others. It is so critical that when you feel that something that is being done is not good for you, you should understand that it doesn't mean that it's not good for everybody. We tend to narrow down everything to individual interests. We tend to narrow down everything to organizations' interests, forgetting the ordinary person. And it is something that touches me because as young people, we tend to be victims always. If you talk of the issue of the economy, young people are the majority and are the ones that are the victims amongst many other people like women and other people. So people must pay attention to critical issues, not what they think is right for them. People must pay attention to critical issues that matter, not waste time trying to negotiate through their way into power. We have to focus on pertinent issues that are critical as we try to dialogue forward.
Thank you. Abe?
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, there are some few issues that I want to respond to. I appreciate the profound obsession by Ramangwana with regards to the term constitutional. From time to time, it is referring to the constitutional existence of ZANU-PF as a party in government. Yet ZANU-PF represents everything that is unconstitutional. I wouldn't want to go through a lot of things, but I'll highlight one or two issues. Number one, if you focus on section 51, there's right to dignity. But if you look at the status quo and the happenings in our country, you see that dignity is missing. Only a few weeks ago, our vice chairperson, Job Sikala, was handcuffed as if he's one of the biggest criminals, yet when real criminals in the mode of Obedum Pof are walking scot-free out of the country. That is not constitutional in any way. Secondly, if there's something that is disturbing, that he believes that when you talk about removing, the next thing that follows is violence. No, we are a non-violent political party, but removing removing AD from government, it's not something that we are going to do violently. We have a peaceful process that we follow, which is also constitutional. From time to time, you refer to constitutional. I will refer to you section 59. Everybody has the right to demonstrate and petition. And this is what we are going to do to ensure that we restore legitimacy. Because when you talk of dialogue, ZANU-PF has called for a dialogue that has no substance whatsoever. Because what you are trying to do is just to sanitize the rigging outcome that we had from the 2018 election. So this is the reason why you see most of the political parties, they actually don't have people, rather individuals who are able to be representing political parties. While it's political parties that are genuine are not there because they believe what you're calling for is not in any way genuine. We have no problem with having a solution for the benefit of the people of Zimbabwe. But what we have maintained to say the process must follow proper mechanisms. When we talk of a dialogue, we need, as I have emphasized earlier on, we need someone who is there to mediate in a proper way, not to pursue political interest from one political party. That will never bring a sustainable solution to the crisis that we are facing. And I also want to highlight that what we have faced for a long time is a situation, for the first time I agree with Louis Matutu, to say as the young people, we have been victims for a long time. So this is why we are saying what we are facing today is actually a crisis that needs to be addressed. But the question is, how do we address that? It does not need Emerson Mnangagwa, because in his right mind, he knows that he is not there as a political leader, but rather as a project of the military. It also brings us to the question which also needs to be addressed through the process of dialogue. And in our framework of reload, we've talked of dialogue as well, but it comes, and when it comes, it will then be followed by what you are telling, where we're calling a national transitional mechanism. I want to highlight that it's not any form of government of national unity, but it's a framework where we draw people from various spheres of life to run the affairs of the country as we go towards the reformation agenda, which will then consequently lead to a free and fair mechanism. Free and fair election. As the current status quo, you see that we have heavy militarization of our government institutions. I can give you one example of Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. I challenge you here, Wamangwana, including Louis Matutu, to avail the public, the resignation letter of Utwaile Slaigwana. We know that he did not resign. He's actually a military man who is now serving in ZEC. And that is actually a challenge going forward. The people of Zimbabwe need institutions that are actually independent, so that when you go for elections in the future, the elections need to be contested by candidates, but the outcome must not be contested. Contestation must only be seen to an extent of an election process, not the outcome. We don't want to see a contested outcome. As a party, we want things to go in a free and fair manner, so that you can even accept whoever wins that particular election, unlike the current status quo, where we actually have challenges with the outcome.
All right, thank you very much. Of course, this broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network and our broadcast partners, Capitalk, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, and of course, Voice of America, going out to 80 stations around the planet. And also, of course, ztn.co.zw is our website. You need to go there to see exciting programming. We've got Extra, which is on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It's our entertainment show. The Couch, it's a sporting show which you cannot miss. And of course, we've got The Mint, which is hosted by me every morning at 10 a.m. It's ZTN and Zimbabwe's top business show. Of course, we'd like to also say that the views expressed by the panels is not those of ZTN or of Zim Papers Group. They are their own views, because remember, at ZTN, we believe in dialogue and debate. Now then, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our show, but before we do that, I think we'd like to give a shout out, because there's a lot of people watching you and watching us out there in the world. Munatsi Zepete from Beijing, Desire Bote from Shanghai, and in Germany, Oswald Mutasa Bakupa from Frankfurt, Julius Chimombe Ematlanini, is that right? Am I said that right? Johannesburg. Utendo Malaseni. Oh, I love that, yeah, my accent. Utendo Svai from Eastern Cape, Edwin Mafa from Cape Town, and of course closer to home, we've got Nyasha Nyanyiwa from Mandara, Harare, and Norbert Maniezo from Harare as well. Welcome all, and all of you out there who are watching us, thank you very much on behalf of Zim Papers TV Network and Zim Papers Group.
Thank you so much for your feedback and analysis. Andy, do we get into the questions?
I think we do. Why not? Yeah, let's look at some of the questions that we have got from our audience here. And of course, remember what I said, these are not our questions, these are from the audience. Why does the ZANU-PF party insist on saying they are the ruling party? This is not a monarchy. Our leadership is selected from the people, by the people, to lead, not to rule. Unless you are saying ZANU-PF is a dictatorship or a monarchy of some sort. Paul, I think that is probably yours.
ZANU-PF is the ruling party because we contest an election in order for us to get the right to rule the country, run the country. But we do so in consultation with other stakeholders. This is why we are for dialogue.
ZANU-PF is the ruling party, not ruling.
Another question that comes through from our audience.
Sorry, Jacob, you were saying?
ZANU-PF is the ruining party. They've ruined our lives, they've ruined the economy, they've ruined the health system, they've ruined everybody, they've ruined marriages. They do not rule anyone, but they ruin. This is ZANU-PF ruins.
Another question that's coming through from our live audience. The church convened a dialogue in February, and President Edie did not attend. That is disregard for the church. What's your opinion, Louis?
See, that's not true to say that the president did not attend, because you don't need him in his physical presence. But I was there myself, and very senior people from our organization, including Comrade Robert Mpofu was there, Minister Opam Chinguri was there. So if anyone was expecting to see the president, then you say ZANU-PF is there. The president is not ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF is an organization, it's not an individual. I would then pose the same question to whoever asked that question to say, now that there's POLAD, why Chamisa is not there? It's not about individuals. It's about what needs to be achieved. And for one to point out to say President Mnangagwa was not there, to me, it's some kind of misguided and lost somewhere.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, as all shows that the chase does, we can carry on talking all night, but we have to come to a close at some point. So, of course, this is that point. So what we will do is very quickly, I can give you each 30 seconds. I will start with Mrs. Holland. I'd like you to sum up. Remember what our conversation is about tonight. Zimbabwe's political dialogue, the final solution. We'd like to at least leave tonight with some form of idea of the way going forward, and Zimbabweans, I'm sure, would like to hear from the panelists. Mrs. Holland, your final words, please, in 30 seconds. Thank you.
I just wanted to do 2 points for people to take home. The first one is about the Zimbabwe military. I was overseas and I was attacked about the military left, right, and center. And I was forced to come up with a position. It is this. If Zimbabweans locate themselves historically where we are, our army is a liberation army. And it was kids who made up that army. And I want to use the example of S.B. Moyo, who is part of the group that was kidnapped or recruited to go to Botswana when he was in Form 3. And he is a child of the war. And if you look at parents Shiri, Chiwenga, who were kidnapped, again, walked from Mount St. Mary's to get into the war. What I yearn for Zimbabwe is for us to actually sit down and get to know one another. The military project to liberate the country happened. They are as frustrated as everybody else to see that the democratization by civilians has not taken place. And I think Mawarire's point that in any discussion where we are, the army should be there is factual, because I believe people will come together. The second point is about the youth. I did make my point clear. I do not attend meetings and talk because we have done our talking. Rather, we wait for the young to articulate the positions forward. And it's only when there is a stalemate like there is now that we do agree to come in to talk. Because the youth must actually learn that you are in a society where the biggest principle and the one that has led Africa to where it is intergenerational connectivity and continuity. And it's done as people are talking in a peaceful environment.
Mrs. Holland, thank you very much. Jacob?
Thank you very much. Our president has launched a 7-day week of prayer. We need to pray for Zimbabwe. We need to pray for wisdom. We need to pray for the actions that we are going to be able to take as Zimbabweans to rescue the country. We have also launched a reload, which is a process of reasserting the Zimbabwean citizenry around the solutions to Zimbabwe. And we do believe after our week of prayer, and if you look at the document reload, we should be able to come up with a solution and come up and engage in a real dialogue. We are moving into the phase where we are going to lead and follow Zimbabweans to the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, your final thoughts, please?
Yes, as Zimbabweans, we must develop a culture of talking and discussing issues. So we have taken lead by launching POLAD. We are still inviting those political players who have not joined POLAD to join POLAD, and together we set the agenda, we set the terms of reference, we create the Zimbabwe we want by talking to each other. We can solve all the problems facing our country today if we can only develop the culture of talking to one another.
I think going forward, we can see that Zimbabweans are talking. Right now, this is a conversation. There are conversations that are happening in people's homes. There are conversations that are happening in different spaces. I think our concern as civil society is to say, how do we connect these conversations? And how do we begin to collectively prioritize what should be on the agenda and the conversation that will shape our country? And above and beyond that, let us remember to respect the right to have an opinion, to respect the right to free speech, and to say what you need to say so that you can actually have an environment that facilitates conversation. And let's have equal protection and equal benefit of the law so that when I speak, my speech is protected and somebody else's speech, when they say exactly the same thing, we get equal treatment. So I think going forward, let us set the framework for this dialogue, the framework for the conversations that we're having based on the constitution that we have.
Thank you. Jealousy?
My appeal is actually to those that purport to be ruling to provide a democratic space, like what they did on the 18th of November. Take away the army from constricting that democratic space and let the citizens demonstrate what they want. If what they want is to remove Mnangagwa, let them remove him. Let the army never constrict the democratic space. If they did that on the 18th of November 2017 and people marched and removed Mugabe, Mangwana and ZANU-PF and the Matema Dandas should allow these people that you say voted for you to pass the final verdict on whether Mnangagwa is legitimate or not. Open that democratic space and let us see whether you stay one day longer in power.
Right, thank you. Lewis, please, thank you very quickly. I mean, and then we get to Obey, because our time is running out, unfortunately. Lewis? Right, please, thank you.
I've got only three things. The first one, there is something that is called patriotism. We have to put Zimbabwe first before anything else. Yes, we've got different interests. Yes, we've got our expectations, but it is our country first before anything else. It is critical that wherever we are, whatever political organization that we belong to, let's put Zimbabwe first before anything else. The second thing, a culture of dialogue is very critical. It is how we define it, it is how we look at it that matters most. We don't need to approach it with pride. We don't need to expect special treatment. We need to be humble. We need to approach it with humility and an understanding that we are leaders. We lead people and they're expecting us to deliver and represent them as their leaders. And the last thing is, as young people, we would want to make sure that each and every process that is taking place, we are accommodated, hear our voices, understand how we think, understand our expectations, understand what we're expecting those in authority to do for us. It is when you involve young people that you lessen certain problems that we are facing as a country. It is when you involve young people that you lessen the burden of demonstrations, because they are there, not because young people want them, but because those that lead young people want them. But as long as young people are involved to the core, then we are going to get somewhere. Each and every Zimbabwean is important. Let's look at the disabled. Let's look at, yes, aggressive society. Let's also look at traditional leaders. Let's look at everybody when we are discussing national issues, which in my view, POLAD has started, and we might go far in improving that platform that has been created so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. Obey?
Okay, thank you so much. I have a few ways as the parting shots. The first thing is that our houses are no longer habitable. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no sugar, there's no bread. So given that background, we have resolved to accept the streets as our second homes. Number two, I would like to urge one Matema Danda to learn to read and understand. The Constitution of Zimbabwe allows everyone to demonstrate and petition, that's section 59. Secondly, every Zimbabwean has a right to life. So he must not be misguided to think that they can kill people against the dictates of the Constitution. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, at least, you know, as we said earlier, we're coming to the end of our show. But however, This is a good step. The Zimbabwe Council of Churches initiative. We're all here. We're here. ZTN is moderating this, of course, and different voices are being heard. Blessing.
Most certainly, Andy. And a special thank you to our partner, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, the ZCC, and our broadcast partners, Capital FM, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, as well as the Voice of America, going out to over 80 channels worldwide. To our online audience and viewers from across the globe, we say thank you and keep checking our social media platforms at ztn.co.zw for future programming of The Chase, as well as other exciting programs from ZTN. We also like to thank our audience that's in-house. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Well, that's all. That leaves me and Blessing just to say thank you to our esteemed panelists. And thank you for watching us and listening to us through our broadcast partners and, of course, through our ZTN Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, and ztn.co.zw. Well, all we can say here from the venue in Harare, Zimbabwe, is have a great night, look after each other, and you all be safe. Goodbye.
Good night.